I think it's safe to say we're getting to the point where we're getting more good video game adaptations than bad ones, right? Recently, we've been spoiled with the likes of like the Mario movie and Arcane and The Last of Us and the Sonic movies. So I thought it might be fun to look back on where we've come from and the very long road it's taken to get here with many, many misses and about 12 Resident Evil movies that have absolutely nothing to do with the games whatsoever. I wanted to go on a quest to find the worst video game movie ever made. So I'm gonna do the exact same thing I did about a year ago in a video about like bad superhero movies, where I'm gonna go through Rotten Tomatoes' list of like 50 ranked video game movies, which is obviously a very reliable source because the second highest thing on here is the Angry Birds movie 2. And just look at the bottom 10 worst ranked ones. And it may be worth bringing up that I have not played any of the games in this video for more than 4 hours, so this is gonna be interesting.
I find this arrangement slightly embarrassing.
So first off, we have the Ratchet and Clank movie that came out in 2016. This one has always been kind of weird to me because Ratchet and Clank is not the kind of series that you would expect to get a feature-length adaptation. And even if you did, surely it would be like a shitty live-action one, right? I'm really surprised they went animated with this one. I mean, Sony has been pushing to make like feature-length adaptations of their game series for a while now. Like, obviously they found more recent success with the live-action Uncharted movie. Not that Ratchet and Clank isn't like well-known or anything, but more so just like, I don't think anyone outside of like people who play games would know what the fuck it is. So they definitely took a chance with it. It didn't pay off, but they tried. Not that I've played it, but apparently this one follows like a retelling of the events of the first game, with Ratchet and Clank meeting for the very first time and joining the Galactic Rangers, who in this movie all look like Overwatch characters. Along with some other changes in there, like the series' main villain, Dr. Nefarious, not even being a robot yet. They instead save that for a post-credit scene for a sequel that will never happen. This one also came out around the same time as like a reboot PS4 game, so I'm assuming they were making like a big push to sort of introduce Ratchet and Clank to new audiences.
Don't move. I'm listening.
When I think Ratchet and Clank, the one thing that has always stood out to me from the one game in the series I've actually played is the guns, right? But that whole aspect of the game is like barely in there. It's more of something they just kind of like reference instead of actually utilize. It was also made on a really small budget of about like $20 million, which, I mean, like it looks good, but it definitely is not quite on the same level as like other animated movies coming out around 2016. And they also have like a bunch of celebrity voice actors in there, like Sylvester Stallone and John Goodman, so I imagine that's where they wasted most of their budget as well. I don't know. I don't think this one is like bad or anything. It is definitely not like bottom 10 worst of all time material for sure. But this is the second time that I've seen it and I just cannot get into it. And I do not know how to explain why. Okay, next up is the first Tomb Raider movie. All three of them are actually on here, but this is the one that has the lowest score, so we're gonna stick with that one. This one does not deserve to be on this list at all. It is actually kind of great. The plot of this one is something to do with like a prophecy about planetary alignment that will unlock time travel, I think.
You're with the Illuminati.
I honestly don't really know. My brother talked over most of it, but this one is one of the very few old video game movies that actually like wholeheartedly embraces what it's adapting and just has like fun with it, you know? Even though she doesn't actually raid any tombs until about 40 minutes into the movie. I was a little disappointed that there weren't any dinosaurs though. I read on Wikipedia though that originally it was supposed to be over 2 hours long and they had to cut it down to about an hour and a half for ratings. And because it was the 2000s, pretty much all of what was cut were just really trashy scenes that were sexualizing Lara. Like, and I quote, by the way, Lara flashing her breast to some villains as a distraction and using her breast to crush a giant millipede. And many similar scenes that I do not want to say out loud. What a horrible day to be able to read. Like, I was going to praise this movie for not sexualizing Lara too much. Like, they do have a shower scene in there, but they also have a shower scene for Daniel Craig, who's also in the movie, so it balances out. But I guess I have to take that back now. In spite of the very low critic scores, this one actually was financially successful enough to get a sequel, which I will definitely be checking out now. This one was like genuinely really fun. I feel bad putting it in the video like this, but honestly, I'm kind of glad that it was in that bottom 10 because otherwise I probably never would have watched it and found out how good it was. So, okay, the next one is Assassin's Creed, which I remember seeing in cinemas and being absolutely bored out of my mind. I played maybe like 4 hours of Assassin's Creed and I can confirm the movie accurately portrays how boring the game is. Okay, I'm kidding. The plot, to my understanding, and I'm going to do this off the top of my head, head. Michael Fassbender plays a guy called Callum, who's like a descendant of the Brotherhood of Assassins, who ends up in some kind of facility where they need like him to go back in time using a device called the Animus to find the location of a mythical artifact called the Apple of Eden that has like the genetic code to eradicate violence in the world that a group called the Templars wants to use for evil. There is no way that is the plot of the games. I refuse to believe it. What's weird about this one though is that pretty much the entire like game of Assassin's Creed, right, is condensed into 3 action scenes in the movie that all take place in the past. The rest of the entire film takes place in this modern day like facility. So like they use that as a framing device to like have these action scenes that are pretty much the best part to stop like the average audience member from falling asleep. And believe me, it doesn't work. I honestly think I can speak for everyone when I say it would have been perfectly fine to just set the whole movie in the past and focus entirely on the assassins. Like, I would have been fine with that. I don't know about you guys. It came off to me at first like a budget thing to set like 60% of the movie in this facility where they just reuse the same rooms 100 times, but it turns out this movie was very expensive to make anyway, so now I'm just confused.
Go ahead, do it. Jump.
Disney Plus, for some reason, lists this one as being 2 hours long, which is about the average length of a tailing mission in a Ubisoft game. And I've never felt more happy in my entire life when the movie ended at 1 hour and 40 minutes and there were 16 minutes of credits. There was meant to be a sequel to this one, and it definitely feels like it because it ends extremely abruptly, but it was cancelled when Disney bought Fox, which was maybe the only good thing that came out of that merger. Okay, so technically the next one should be one of the Resident Evil movies, which I am sure you guys have been waiting for this entire video, but I couldn't just watch that on its own. I would have felt like I had to watch 80 movies to get up to it, so, you know, sorry. So instead, we're gonna do the 2003 Doom movie with The Rock. Fuck yeah. This one and the Tomb Raider movie I actually genuinely like, but I think I may be one of the only ones because I was like scrolling through my friend's Letterboxd reviews earlier and it was not looking good. There's no Doom guy in this one, unfortunately, because that would be too fun. So instead, we follow a group of annoying misogynistic Marines led by Dwayne the Cock Johnson.
You know, Duke, I bet secretly you have a big heart.
And that's not the only secret big thing I got.
Now, I actually have played Doom, just not Doom 3, which this one is very heavily based on, which as far as I know was the one that they tried to turn into a horror game, which like Doom fans didn't really like at all. It's very much like Aliens in the way that we like follow a group of soldiers investigating a mysterious space facility where something has gone wrong but we don't know quite what it is. And you know, it starts off as like a horror until it gradually descends into like an action movie by the end. You don't even see a real demon until about 45 minutes into the movie, which I absolutely understand if you'd find that like boring as shit, but I actually kind of appreciated that about it. And also it uses like a lot of practical effects, which was cool, so that not all of the creatures are like really bad early 2000s CGI.
It may even be reversible.
Dr. Carmack's condition is irreversible. Because Carmack's condition is that he's dead.
This one is very violent, as a Doom movie should be, and they get the BFG in there and use it for more than 5 seconds, so this one gets quite a few things right. I think the biggest gripe I have with it though, not even as a big Doom fan, is that they keep all of the Mars stuff and the teleportation, but for some reason they drew the line at the demons being from hell, so they changed their origin into being just some boring genetic mutation that they created by accident that willingly chooses who it turns into a monster and who it gives superpowers. And the only reason they put that in the movie is so that Carl Urban, who plays the main character, can kill 1 million demons at the end and have a big dumb superhero fight with Dwayne Johnson. I think the thing that everyone remembers about this one is the one-take FPS scene, which is very awesome. This was another one that I'd seen before this video, and I enjoyed it just as much the second time, so I don't know, maybe I'm just weird. It is definitely not one of the worst video game movies ever made. That should go to the more recent one they did, Doom Annihilation. You know, the one that was so bad that even the creators of Doom said they had nothing to do with it? The only reason that one has a higher score is because nobody has seen it.
We're not doing anything like this.
Then what the fuck is that?
Next up is the Max Payne movie, and I have played about like 4 minutes of Max Payne 2, so I am very excited to talk about it as a huge fan. Starring, of all people, Mark Wahlberg as Max Payne, who spends the entire movie trying to track down the man that killed his family while shooting as many people as possible in slow motion, which is just like the game, I think. But yeah, Max Payne actually doesn't have all that many action sequences in it, which was annoying. There's like maybe 3 or 4 scenes in the whole movie where people shoot guns, and they take a really, really long time to do like the slow motion bullet time thing from the games, and even then they only do it like twice. I know it's not the easiest thing to adapt into a story, but like, come on. One thing I do appreciate about it though is the way that they make the city look throughout the entire movie, with the way that it's like always snowing or raining. It just looks like fucking miserable the whole film. Okay, the next one on here is the 2015 Hitman movie. It's funny actually because both of the Hitman movies are on this list, but it's the newer one that has the lower Rotten Tomatoes score, so we're going with that one. Hitman Agent, which is the 47th film in the franchise, almost had me in the first 40 minutes or so. For a while, I got genuinely kind of excited because 47 was the bad guy for a bit, and we followed this girl called Katia Van Dies instead.
Where is Katia Van Dies?
It's kind of like the Terminator, where we like follow the perspective of like the target, which actually worked kind of well, I thought. But then of course it switches gears halfway when we find out that 47 isn't the bad guy after all, and he works with Katia to find her dad who created the agent program, and it kind of lost me. They do incorporate like some things from the game, like he changes his costume like once, but the rest of my exposure to the Hitman series has been through Donkey videos, and there were absolutely no homing briefcases in this movie, so I'm just going to assume it's extremely unfaithful to the source material. Number 4 is Silent Hill Revelation 3D.
Go to hell!
Can't you see? We're already here.
This one is rough. It's from that 2011-2012 era of 3D movies where the effects were just a little bad. Even as someone who's never played any of the games, it hurts to see Silent Hill reduced to like a dumb popcorn movie that annoying teenagers go and see with their friends and like loudly scream at every single jump scare. It's one of those kind of movies. I didn't get time to watch the first Silent Hill movie, which I hear mixed things about. Like, some people say it's alright, but it was also on their bottom list, so it's probably not great. Everything in this movie has to be clearly explained to the audience as to why it should be scary. Like, we have to dumb everything down to the point where even Silent Hill has a backstory where it was built on an ancient burial ground where a girl that was burned to death cursed it to have horrible creatures roam it forever. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but that just sounds so, like, not Silent Hill at all. I mean, I would look it up to see if that's accurate to the game, but I've been lying to myself for like 10 years that I'll eventually work up the courage to play one of the games, so I just don't want to spoil it yet. We don't even enter Silent Hill until about halfway through the movie. For some reason, I thought it would get better from there, but it's just kind of like a bunch of random shit happening for no reason, and it's kind of hard to be scared when you don't know what you're supposed to be afraid of, if that makes sense. They did kind of nail Heather Mason, though, the main character of Silent Hill 3, who looks pretty bang on to how she looks in the game, and a lot of the environments are really cool too. They just don't use any of them for very long. Apparently this one is meant to tie very heavily into the first film, which I know unusual for a sequel, right? So maybe I will have to watch that one to get more out of Revelation, but I doubt that very much. Alright, number 3, Mortal Kombat Annihilation. I have been looking forward to this one. I will defend the original Mortal Kombat movie with my life. It is super dumb and silly, and yet actually somehow really cool at the same time. Mortal Kombat Annihilation, on the other hand, is like everything that could have gone wrong with the first movie condensed into like an hour and a half. Genuinely, the entire thing looks like a Nostalgia Critic sketch, you know? With the original movie, I remember reading that they added like a bunch of fight scenes at the last minute because like test audiences said there weren't enough of them, and somehow they ended up being like the best part of the movie. But in this one, it is very clear the intention was just to go fucking all in on the fight scenes. Like, they throw in as many as possible. Genuinely, I think they happen every 5 minutes. And there are so many of them, and yet they forgot to make any of them good. Annihilation has an unbelievable amount of references to the games. Like, there are so many characters in this movie, and they just do not care if they have a reason to be there. There are so many characters in here that are literally only there for like one scene, or just to show up and then die purely for the sake of fan service. Like, you hear from a lot of people with like adaptations like this that they should just throw in more references to the games, and this is a very good example of why that is a very bad idea.
It's my animality.
Now, I need to mention that this one has a higher budget than the last one by $10 million.
Impressive.
I did read that the producer explained the film literally wasn't finished, like the effects weren't done, but the studio just wanted to rush it out as quickly as possible, which actually does kind of explain a lot. I mean, it does sound like a very obvious excuse, but if you've actually seen the movie, it's very easy to believe.
You're alive. Too bad you will die.
Second to last, with a whopping 3%, is Street Fighter: The Legend of Chun-Li. Both this one and the original movie are in the bottom 10 on Rotten Tomatoes, but unfortunately, as much as I wanted to watch that original Street Fighter movie again, because I actually kind of like it, unfortunately this one has the lowest score, so by my own rules, I have fucked myself over. With the first movie being a pretty big failure, their second attempt in the late 2000s was a G.I. Joe origin-style prequel movie based on, like, that third most popular character. I know a little bit more about Street Fighter than most of the other games in this video, and the biggest thing to note for me is how little resemblance this has to the source material. I would argue that Dragon Ball Evolution has more in line with the original work than this movie does. The only Street Fighter characters in it, aside from Chun-Li, are Bison, Balrog, Vega, and Nash. And none of them except Vega wear anything even remotely resembling themselves from the game. I really would have thought they would have at least chucked in like Guile or Ryu in there, but it's surprisingly restrained in how they just focus the spotlight on Chun-Li, which you can either take as like a complete disdain for the source material or a really impressive dedication to like slowly building up to future movies. They kill Bison at the end though, but at least he gets one of the coolest death scenes of all time. But yeah, it feels like one of those things where they were gonna like gradually become more accurate to the games in future sequels. Like there's even a scene at the end where they reference the Street Fighter tournament and Ryu, which is very annoying.
They've been talking about a fighter in Japan. Ryu something? Wanna come?
And finally, number 1, Alone in the Dark. Oh god. Directed by the legendarily bad Yue Boll, with a whopping 1% on Rotten Tomatoes. God bless that one guy that was like, fuck yeah, this is awesome. Yue Boll is pretty much cheating. Like, he takes up 5 of the bottom 10 on this list. I'm not kidding. And there was no way in hell I was watching more than one of his movies, so I thought I may as well just do the worst one, and I regretted that so much. This was the very first one of his movies that I have ever seen, and look, I've heard stuff about the guy throughout my entire life, but I have to give him credit. I did not think I would already be contemplating suicide only 30 minutes into it. For those who don't know, Alone in the Dark is like a very old, atmospheric, slow burn survival horror game on the PC, which is why this movie has so many fight scenes and car chases in it. I don't think this man is physically capable of not making an action movie. There are so many scenes of military guys shooting these generic CGI creatures. I swear to God, I think there was a point about halfway through where I reached like temporary brain death, so I honestly could not tell you if that wasn't just like the second half of the movie in its entirety, because that's what it fucking felt like. With a plot and backstory so convoluted that they have to explain it to you in an opening title crawl, which is always a good sign, right? The whole thing to me just felt like Yue Boll was very upset he didn't get to make the Resident Evil movies. I was reading into the production of this one, and I was not at all surprised to learn that the original script was meant to be a slow burn thriller much closer to the game, but of course Boll rejected it in favor of turning it into this. I'm really trying my hardest to be able to explain to you what is wrong with this film, but I want to say you have to watch it in order to find out why, but I also really don't want you to watch it, so it is just so mind-numbingly boring after the first like 30 minutes where it stops being funny. I do think you might have a good time if you watch this one with friends though, just to have like a good laugh, but I did not do that. And I was miserable. This was the first one I watched out of all of these, so I think that's the reason I've been able to look at all of the other ones in a positive light, because I knew that there was no way in hell any of them could be this bad. Whether or not this is the worst video game movie of all time, I couldn't tell you, but it is definitely the worst one on this list, for sure. Until the FNAF movie comes out.